Well, for more on the Yemen election, let's speak with Philip Eliason. He's a former diplomat and Middle East expert, and these days is a consultant. Philip lived and worked in Yemen for more than a year, implementing an aid program for the British government. And tonight he joins us from our Canberra studio. Philip Eliason, thanks very much for your time. One candidate in this election, so the result is hardly going to be a mystery. Why then is this election so important?
Well, it's just as the BBC news footage showed you. It's about getting rid of an old regime and being able to install at least the first step in constructing a new form of governance in Yemen. Getting rid of the former president, Ali Abdullah Saleh, was very difficult for the Yemeni public and for the political system to be able to do. And now having an election is the first step on that path. In another 2 years' time, we'll be seeing parliamentary elections in Yemen with any luck, and hopefully by that stage we'll have seen as well the greater organisation of what we might call here civil society. It's a very, very political place, Yemen, lots of political parties, but it's why they exist and what services they deliver to the public if elected into government is the major question which will help resolve this poverty matter alluded to before.
So, Philip, over the past 12 months, how has the Arab Spring reshaped the mood of the electorate, and what expectations are there of the new leader?
Well, firstly, the Arab Spring, as it occurred in Tunisia, as it occurred in Egypt, was quite different from the phenomenon going on in Yemen. In Yemen, we had an elite recycling, if you like. That is where individuals, families, clans, and particular confederations of tribes wanted to change who was at the helm of the state, rather than changing the nature of representation and the political process. That's the first thing. In Libya, we saw a different type of general public uprising against an incumbent regime, and we see its continuing problems. Both of those models are not the Yemeni model of an Arab Spring. What we're seeing in Yemen is really the challenge of one group of what we would call in Australia, elite leaders against another. And it's that cycling through of the situation which has to be done, or should be done, hopefully, in a more tranquil and less violent way than can be quite conceivably the otherwise in a country like Yemen.
I guess for an outsider looking at this and thinking, well, if there's change being sought, a change from the past being brought about through these elections, why is there only one candidate?
Well, Yemen's a fractured country. Its political environment has been weakened over time, despite the fact that they're political parties. The idea of having a president to help form an operating government of national unity is fundamental to earning some breathing space in Yemen. And that breathing space, hopefully, from Saturday onwards, when the elected president will be confirmed by a special sitting of Parliament, from Saturday onwards, we'll be able to see a lightening of the situation in Yemen and people returning to some work. It's a breathing space routine. This is not a solution.
How much breathing space will there be for the new president, given that, as you pointed out there, this tribalism, this deep tribalism in this country, the division and enmity between the north and the south? How great is the challenge for the new leader to bring about a semblance of unity?
Just one comment about the tribalism issue. Tribalism in Yemen is not a bad thing. Tribalism in Yemen is the social function which is holding the country together. That's the music of 1,000 years which people understand, they can follow, they can obey, and they give allegiance to. It's the overlay of a modern political system which is the problem in Yemen at the moment, working through ancient allegiances into a more modern expression of civic engagement. Now, it's true Yemen is fractured geographically. In the north they have a problem with the Houthi tribes people, Zaydi Shiites. The central part of the country is Sunni, and the southern part of the country is also Sunni but wants to be separate after its experience of the merger and then civil war in 1994 with the north. So the new president, Abdur Rabu, will have to try to formulate a pattern of disbursement of state activity to satisfy as a down payment the claims that the Northerners and the Southerners have over the idea of a state of Yemen. At the same time, he's got general poverty. We heard about malnutrition. There's failures in electricity services. Most villages don't have water. There's very, very serious socioeconomic problems there which can still cause regional armed conflict. And this is an intractable issue unless, of course, there's, let's say, greater coherence of the Yemeni state. So perhaps today is the day we'll see a step in that direction after the departure of the former president, who nonetheless wants to come back.
Philip, as you just mentioned there in the BBC report that we all saw in regard to this massive problem of malnutrition, especially among children, as we saw, there was a woman who said if the problem isn't addressed now, all will regret it later. Now, apart from the obvious dreadful regret of the loss of life later, how much is the presence of Al-Qaeda a potential source of regret emanating from this whole issue of poverty and of hunger?
I think the expression of the presence of Al-Qaeda in Yemen, firstly on one hand is not wrong, but it's overblown in many instances. The owners of the land, and look, mark these words. In Australia, we have the same debate about owners of the land under tradition, don't we? The owners of the land under tradition in Yemen are the tribes. If Al-Qaeda wants to establish a different form of governance and control in the area, then the tribes will have to relinquish what is their essential being, which is territory. And I don't see any prospect for that happening. And in fact, we have seen time and time again, when there's pressure on the tribes to give up Al-Qaeda extremists, they've done it. Now, we can see hungry people, we can see separatists, we can see gangs of youths, we can see men who have been shamed recover their honour. We can see all sorts of factors behind the conflict in regional and rural Yemen at the moment. It's not a simple question of it's Al-Qaeda gradually taking over. It's a question of what do they say is driving them? What kind of flag do they fly under? But how long into the future will that same flag be flying? You know, Al-Qaeda took over a town, but then has been thrown out of that by the military. It's had its leadership killed by US drones and now being disowned by some of its tribal supporters. Opportunism is part of this logic as well, and that's what we'll continue to see in future.
Philip, just following on from that, and also the fact that we talked earlier about the expectations of the electorate here, what about the expectations of the international community, especially other countries in the region and the United States?
Well, firstly, other countries in the region don't have elections like Yemen does. Other countries in the region don't have, a reasonably active political press. Other countries in the region aren't Republican. These are factors for tension on the Arabian Peninsula, despite the fact that the solution to Yemen will come from, in a large part, the finances provided by Saudi Arabia, the finances provided by Qatar, by UAE, and Kuwait possibly. Those countries are not necessarily at ease in the direction in the future of a Republican Yemen, a party political Yemen, a more democratic Yemen. For as far as Western countries go, the Yemen and Saudi Arabia and the whole Arabian plate there is holding a strategic position of great importance. The Red Sea, the transport of goods and oil through the region, the movement of people. Yemen is a fulcrum. It was a fulcrum in 1830. It was a fulcrum in 1860. It was forgotten for a long time under the Empire of Britain, and is now just by virtue of the mayhem in the country demonstrating the nature of it being a pivot point for security, and that's what the West is worried about as well.
Middle East expert Philip Eliason, fascinating talking with you. I thank you for sharing your knowledge with us tonight.
Well, thanks very much.